The dust on her father's boots hadn't even settled when Ophelia Zimmerman felt the door slam behind her, the sound echoing through the empty street like a gunshot that would haunt her forever. She stood there in the scorching afternoon sun of Pueblo, Colorado, one hand pressed against her still flat stomach, the other clutching a small carpet bag that contained everything she owned in this world, while behind that closed door her mother wept and her father shouted words that would never be taken back. It was June of 1882, and Ophelia had just learned that being 19 years old, unmarried, and carrying a child meant you were no longer welcome in the only home you had ever known, no matter how much your mother pleaded or how many tears stained the floorboards. The streets of Pueblo stretched before her like an endless desert of judgment and whispered condemnations. She had nowhere to go. Her sisters had been forbidden from helping her brothers instructed to turn their backs if they saw her in town. The man who had promised her the world, who had whispered sweet words under the cottonwood trees by the Arkansas River, had disappeared the moment she told him about the baby, riding out of town 3 weeks ago without so much as a goodbye. His name had been Thomas, and she had believed every lie that fell from his lips like poisoned honey. Ophelia walked through town with her head held high despite everything, refusing to give the gossiping women on the boardwalks the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She had cried enough in the past week, enough tears to fill the river itself. Now she needed to think, to plan, to figure out how a young woman alone in the world could possibly survive. The sun beat down mercilessly, and sweat trickled down her back beneath her simple cotton dress. She had $5 in her pocket, money she had saved from selling her needlework, and that would not last long. By the time evening approached, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple above the distant mountains, Ophelia had learned that no respectable boarding house would take her, not once they learned of her condition. The few places that would have accepted her money were establishments where decent women did not stay, and she was not desperate enough for that. Not yet. She found herself sitting on a bench outside the general store, watching families pass by, watching children run and play while their mothers called them home for supper, and she wondered what kind of life her child would have with a mother who had nowhere to go and no way to provide. The store owner, Mr. Peterson, came out eventually and asked her to move along. He was not unkind about it, but his meaning was clear. She was bad for business, a visible reminder of sin and its consequences. Ophelia picked up her carpet bag and walked toward the edge of town, where the buildings grew sparse and the wild country began. She had not eaten since breakfast, and her stomach growled, but she ignored it. The baby needed food more than she did, and she would save what little money she had for as long as possible. She must have looked like a ghost wandering the dusty road, because when the cowboy rode up beside her on his bay mare, he startled her so badly she nearly dropped her bag. He was tall in the saddle, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of sage in the fading light. His face was weathered from years under the sun, but he could not have been much older than 25, and there was something kind in the way he looked at her, something that made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Evening, miss," he said, tipping his hat. "You look like you could use some help." Ophelia straightened her shoulders, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "I am managing just fine, thank you." He studied her for a long moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her brave facade. "Name is Grant Gallagher. I have a ranch about 5 miles west of here. You are welcome to a hot meal and a place to sleep for the night, no strings attached. You look like you have been walking a long while." She wanted to refuse. She had been raised to be cautious of strangers, especially men, especially now. But the kindness in his voice, The genuine concern in his eyes and the desperate situation she found herself in all conspired to make her nod her head. Ophelia Zimmerman. And yes, I have been walking most of the day. Grant dismounted and offered her his hand. Let me help you up. Clara here is gentle as a lamb, and she will not mind carrying us both. Ophelia hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. It was rough with calluses, the hand of a man who worked hard for his living, and it was steady and warm. He helped her into the saddle with surprising gentleness, then swung up behind her, careful not to touch her more than necessary. She appreciated that small courtesy more than he could know. The ride to his ranch took nearly an hour as the sun set completely and stars began to emerge in the vast Colorado sky. Grant did not press her with questions, did not demand to know her story, and she was grateful for the silence. She could feel the steady rise and fall of his breathing behind her, could smell the scent of horses and leather and honest sweat, and for the first time that day she felt something like safety. The ranch, when they reached it, was modest but well kept. A small house stood surrounded by corrals and outbuildings, with mountains rising dark against the starlit sky in the distance. A dog barked as they approached, then came running up with its tail wagging. Grant helped Ophelia down from the horse, then led Clara toward the barn. "Go on inside and make yourself comfortable," he said. "I will just tend to the horse and be right in. There is a lamp on the table just inside the door and matches beside it." Ophelia did as he suggested, finding the lamp and coaxing it to life with trembling hands. The interior of the house was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace, a wooden table and chairs, a small kitchen area, and a door that presumably led to a bedroom. Everything spoke of a man who lived alone but took pride in his home. She set her carpetbag down and stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, unsure what to do with herself. Grant came in a few minutes later, the dog at his heels. "That is Rusty," he said, gesturing to the dog. "He looks fierce, but he would not hurt a fly. Are you hungry?" "I am not much of a cook, but I can manage biscuits and bacon and eggs." "You do not have to go to any trouble," Ophelia said quietly. "You have already been more than kind. It is no trouble at all." He moved to the kitchen area and began pulling out supplies. "Truth is, it is nice to have company. Gets lonely out here sometimes." Ophelia watched him work, this stranger who had shown her more kindness in an hour than her own family had in the past week. She wanted to tell him everything, to unburden herself of the whole sad story, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she asked, "Have you been ranching long?" "About 3 years now. Saved up money working cattle drives, then bought this place from a widow who was moving back east to live with her daughter. It is not much yet, but I am building it up slow and steady. Got about 50 head of cattle, a few horses. Hoping to expand next year if the prices hold." He talked while he cooked, filling the silence with easy conversation about his plans for the ranch, about the weather, about the challenges of making a living in this hard country. Ophelia found herself relaxing despite everything, drawn in by the warmth in his voice and the genuine passion he had for his work. When the food was ready, he set it out on the table and gestured for her to sit. It was simple fare, but it tasted better than anything she had eaten in weeks, probably because it was offered with genuine kindness rather than judgment. She ate slowly, trying not to appear too hungry, but Grant seemed to notice anyway and quietly pushed more biscuits toward her. "So," he said finally, when they had both finished eating, "I do not mean to pry, but it is pretty clear you are in some kind of trouble. You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to, but if there is anything I can do to help, I would be glad to." Ophelia set down her fork and folded her hands in her lap. She had to tell him. It would be obvious soon enough anyway, and he deserved to know what kind of situation he was involving himself in by helping her. "I am with child," she said quietly, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "The father left town weeks ago. My family cast me out this morning. I have nowhere to go and no prospects." She watched his face carefully, waiting for the judgment, the disgust, the sudden coldness. Instead, she saw only sympathy and something that might have been anger, though not directed at her. "That is a hard situation," he said slowly. "Your family sounds like they are not much of a family at all if they would turn out their own daughter when she needs them most." "They are respectable people," Ophelia said, though the words tasted bitter. "They have a reputation to maintain. A daughter with a bastard child would ruin that." Grant leaned back in his chair, studying her. "What do you want to do? What are your plans?" "I do not have any," she admitted. "I was trying to figure that out when you found me. I suppose I will have to find work somewhere, save up money, try to make a life somehow." "What kind of work can a woman get around here, especially once you start showing?" "I do not know," Ophelia whispered, feeling tears prick at her eyes despite her determination not to cry. "Sewing, maybe, laundry, something." Grant was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was careful. "I have a proposition for you. Now, I want you to hear me out before you say anything. This ranch is a lot of work for one person, and it would be helpful to have someone to manage the house, do the cooking, maybe help with some of the lighter chores. I could use the help, and you need a place to stay. You could work here in exchange for room and board." Ophelia stared at him. "You want me to work for you? I want to help you," he said simply. "And I figure this way you get to keep your independence and your pride, because you would be earning your keep. No charity, just honest work." "People would talk," she said. "An unmarried woman living on a ranch with an unmarried man." "People are already talking about you," Grant pointed out gently. "At least here you would have a roof over your head and food in your belly, and that baby needs a father." The last words hung in the air between them, and Ophelia felt her breath catch. "What do you mean?" Grant leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "I mean that a child needs two parents, needs a name that is not bastard, needs a father to teach him how to be strong and a mother to teach him how to be good. I am not saying we have to get married right away, or ever if you do not want to. But I am saying that if you decide to stay, I would be willing to claim that baby as mine, to give it my name and my protection." "Why?" Ophelia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Grant said. "Because I know what it is like to grow up without a father, and I would not wish that on any child. And because I think you are brave and strong for not giving up, even when everything has gone wrong. That is the kind of person I would be proud to know." Ophelia felt tears spill down her cheeks, and this time she did not try to stop them. "I do not deserve your kindness." "Everyone deserves kindness," Grant said firmly, "especially when they are hurting. So what do you say? Will you stay at least for a while?" "Give yourself time to figure things out." She should have said no. It was too much, too generous, too good to be true. But as she sat there in that small ranch house, looking at this man who had shown her more compassion in one evening than she had received from anyone else in weeks, she found herself nodding. "Yes, yes, I will stay, thank you." "No need for thanks," Grant said, standing up from the table. "Let me show you the bedroom. You can sleep there, and I will take the floor out here." "I cannot take your bed," Ophelia protested. "You can and you will," Grant said in a tone that brooked no argument. "You need proper rest, especially in your condition." "I have slept on worse than a floor, believe me." He showed her to the small bedroom, which contained a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a dresser, and a washstand with a pitcher and basin. It was simple but clean, and to Ophelia it looked like paradise. Grant brought in her carpet bag and set it on the bed. "There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash up," he said. "And extra blankets in the bottom drawer if you get cold. Sleep as late as you need tomorrow. We will figure out the details of everything in the morning." "Grant," Ophelia said as he turned to leave. He paused in the doorway and looked back at her. "Thank you, truly. You saved my life today." "We are just getting started," he said with a small smile. "Sleep well, Ophelia." She did sleep well, better than she had in weeks, despite everything that had happened. The bed was comfortable, the night air coming through the window was fresh and cool, and for the first time since she had discovered she was pregnant, she felt something like hope. The next morning, Ophelia woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was, and then memory flooded back. She sat up slowly, pressing a hand to her stomach, and wondered if she had dreamed the whole thing. But no, this was Grant's room, Grant's house, and she was here because he had offered her a chance when no one else would. She got up and washed her face, then changed into her other dress, a faded blue calico that had seen better days. Her stomach felt unsettled, as it often did in the mornings now, but she forced herself to breathe deeply until the nausea passed. When she opened the bedroom door, she found Grant already up and moving around the kitchen. "Morning," he said cheerfully. "I hope I did not wake you." "I am afraid ranching starts early." "What time is it?" Ophelia asked. "About 6. I have already fed the animals and collected the eggs. Thought I would make breakfast, but if you are up to it, you are welcome to take over. Fair warning, my cooking is edible but not much more than that." Ophelia managed a smile. "I can cook. Let me take over." She moved to the kitchen area and began assessing what supplies were available. Grant had the basics: flour and salt and lard, eggs from his chickens, some bacon. She set to work making a proper breakfast while Grant sat at the table and watched, sipping coffee from a tin cup. "You are good at that," he observed as she flipped flapjacks with practiced ease. "My mother insisted all her daughters learn to cook properly," Ophelia said. Then, more quietly, "I suppose that is one thing I can thank her for." Grant did not comment on that, but his expression was sympathetic. When the food was ready, they ate together, and Ophelia was pleased to see him enjoy the meal. It felt good to do something useful, to contribute in some small way to this household that had taken her in. After breakfast, Grant showed her around the ranch properly. It was a nice spread, with good water from a creek that ran through the property, decent grazing land, and sturdy buildings that had been well maintained. He introduced her to the chickens, the cow that provided milk, and the horses in the corral. His pride in the place was evident in every word, and Ophelia found herself genuinely interested in learning about ranch life. "The house could use a woman's touch," Grant admitted as they walked back toward it. "I am not much for decorating or keeping things tidy beyond the basics." "If you feel like fixing it up you are welcome to do so." "I will do what I can," Ophelia said, "though I do not have much to work with." "There is a trunk in the back room that belonged to the widow I bought this place from," Grant said. "She left behind some things she did not want to take east. You are welcome to go through it, see if there is anything useful." Over the next few days, Ophelia settled into a routine. She woke early and made breakfast, then spent her mornings cleaning and organizing the house. In the afternoons, she worked on mending Grant's clothes which had been neglected for too long, and exploring the trunk of items the widow had left behind. She found fabric and thread, some books, a few dishes, and other odds and ends. It felt strange to be making a home in someone else's space, but Grant encouraged her to change whatever she wanted, and gradually the house began to feel less like a bachelor's cabin and more like a proper home. Grant was gone most days, working with the cattle or mending fences or handling the 1,000 other tasks that came with running a ranch. But he always came back for meals, and in the evenings they would sit and talk. Ophelia learned that he had grown up in Kansas, that his mother had died when he was 12, and his father had been killed in the war, that he had been on his own since he was 15. He had worked every kind of job imaginable before saving enough to buy this land, and he was determined to make something of himself, to build something that would last. Ophelia, in turn, told him about growing up in Pueblo, about her sisters and brothers, about the life she had expected to have before everything fell apart. She told him about Thomas, about how charming he had been, how he had courted her properly at first, winning her trust before leading her astray. Grant listened without judgment, and she appreciated that more than she could say. 3 weeks after she arrived at the ranch, Ophelia was in the garden she had started, pulling weeds in the late afternoon sun, when she heard a horse approaching. She looked up, shading her eyes, and felt her stomach drop when she recognized her father riding up the path. Elias Zimmerman sat tall in the saddle, his face set in harsh lines, and Ophelia instinctively took a step back toward the house. Grant must have seen him coming too, because he emerged from the barn and strode over to intercept her father before he could reach Ophelia. She watched as the two men faced each other, her heart pounding. "I am looking for my daughter," Elias said, his voice carrying across the yard. "I was told she might be here." "She is here," Grant said calmly, "and she is doing just fine. I need to speak with her." "That depends on whether she wants to speak with you." Elias's face darkened. "That is my daughter. I have a right to speak to her." "You gave up that right when you threw her out of your house," Grant said, and there was steel in his voice now. "If Ophelia wants to talk to you, she will. But I will not have you coming onto my property and making demands." Ophelia found her courage and walked over to stand beside Grant. "What do you want, father?" Elias looked at her, and for a moment something that might have been regret flickered across his face. "Your mother is worried about you. She wanted me to check that you are all right." "I am fine," Ophelia said stiffly. "You are living here, with him?" Elias gestured at Grant. "I am working here," Ophelia corrected. "Grant has been kind enough to give me employment and a place to stay." "People are talking," Elias said. "It is not proper." "Nothing about this situation is proper, father," Ophelia said, and was pleased that her voice did not shake. "But this is the life I have now, thanks to you. So you can go back to town and tell Mother that I am alive and well, and that she need not worry." Elias looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him it would be futile. "If you need anything," he said finally, "you can send word." "I have everything I need right here," Ophelia replied. Her father looked between her and Grant one more time, then turned his horse and rode away. Ophelia watched him go, feeling a strange mix of emotions. She had stood up to him, had not backed down or apologized, and that felt good. But there was also sadness, a mourning for the relationship they had once had, before she had disappointed him so thoroughly. Grant put a hand on her shoulder, a brief touch of comfort. "You did well," he said quietly. "That could not have been easy." "It was not," Ophelia admitted. "But it was necessary." She turned to look up at him. "Thank you for standing with me." "Always," Grant said simply, and something in the way he said it made her heart skip. As summer deepened into July and then August, Ophelia found herself growing more comfortable at the ranch, and more comfortable with Grant. He was unlike any man she had ever known. He was strong and capable, able to handle any task the ranch demanded, but he was also gentle and thoughtful. He noticed when she was tired and insisted she rest. He brought her wildflowers from the fields. He talked to her like her opinions mattered, like she was an equal partner in this strange arrangement they had made. And slowly, without quite meaning to, Ophelia found herself falling in love with him. It was in the small things. The way he smiled at her over breakfast. The way he always made sure she had enough food, even if it meant he went with less. The way he talked about the future, and increasingly that future seemed to include her and the baby. He had started referring to the child as ours instead of yours. And every time he did, Ophelia felt warmth spread through her chest. The baby was growing. By late August, there was no hiding her condition anymore, her belly rounding out visibly beneath her dress. Grant had ridden into town and come back with fabric, suggesting she might want to make some new dresses that would be more comfortable. He had been almost shy about it, clearly worried about overstepping, but Ophelia had been touched by his thoughtfulness. One evening in early September, as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Grant turned to her with an expression she could not quite read. "Ophelia, I want to ask you something, and I want you to feel free to say no if you want to." Her heart started beating faster. "What is it?" "I have been thinking about what I said when you first came here about the baby needing a father. I meant it then and I mean it now. But I have been thinking maybe we should make it official. Maybe we should get married." Ophelia stared at him, her breath caught somewhere in her chest. Grant continued, words tumbling out faster now. "I know we have not known each other that long, and I know you might not feel the same way I do. But I think we get along well and I care about you, and I want to give that baby a proper name and a proper family. We could go into town next week, see the preacher. It does not have to be a big thing, just us and witnesses. What do you think? How do you feel?" Ophelia asked quietly. "You said I might not feel the same way you do. What way is that?" Grant looked at her for a long moment, and in his eyes she saw everything she had been hoping to see. "I am falling in love with you, Ophelia. Maybe I started falling the first night I saw you walking alone on that road. You are brave and strong and kind, and every day I wake up grateful that I found you. I want to marry you not because it is the right thing to do, though it is. I want to marry you because I cannot imagine my life without you in it anymore." Tears sprang to Ophelia's eyes, but this time they were happy tears. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I did not think I could after Thomas, after everything. But you have shown me what a good man is like, what real kindness and real strength look like. Yes, Grant. Yes, I will marry you." The smile that broke across his face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He reached for her hand, holding it gently. "You have made me the happiest man in Colorado," he said. "I promise I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this choice." "I could never regret it," Ophelia said. "You saved me, Grant. You saved both of us." "You saved yourself," Grant corrected. "You were the one who did not give up, who kept going even when everything seemed hopeless. I just gave you a place to land." They sat there as the stars came out, holding hands and planning their future. It was not a fairy tale romance, not the kind of story that got told in books. But it was real, and it was theirs, and that made it more valuable than any fantasy. The following week, Grant drove them into Pueblo in his wagon. Ophelia wore her best dress, the one she had arrived in, which she had carefully cleaned and mended. Grant wore clean clothes and had even trimmed his hair. They went to the small church on the edge of town, and the preacher, Reverend Matthews, agreed to marry them that very afternoon. They needed witnesses, and Grant asked the preacher's wife and the general store owner, Mr. Peterson, who looked surprised but agreed. The ceremony was simple, just the words of the marriage service and the exchange of a simple gold band that Grant had purchased the day before. But when he slipped it onto her finger and said, "I do," Ophelia felt her whole world shift into place. She was Ophelia Gallagher now, and the baby would be born with a father's name. They did not linger in town after the wedding. Ophelia caught sight of one of her sisters across the street, and the look of shock on Anna's face was clear even from a distance. Let them talk, Ophelia thought. Let them be surprised. She had a husband who loved her and a home to return to. As they drove back to the ranch, Grant reached over and took her hand. "Mrs. Gallagher," he said, testing out the name. "Mr. Gallagher," Ophelia replied with a smile. "I like the sound of that." "So do I." That night, for the first time, they shared the bedroom. Grant was gentle and patient, mindful of her condition, and he made her feel cherished in a way she had never experienced before. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, Grant's hand resting protectively over her belly, Ophelia felt a peace she had not known was possible. "I felt the baby move today," she said softly. "Just little flutters, but I am sure it was the baby." "Really?" Grant's voice was full of wonder. "That is amazing. Do you want to feel?" She guided his hand to the right spot, and they lay there waiting. After a few minutes, there was a small flutter, barely perceptible, but Grant's sharp intake of breath told her he had felt it. "That is our child," he said, awe in his voice. "Our baby." "Yes," Ophelia said, and realized that somewhere along the way that had become the truth. This was not just her baby anymore. It was theirs, bound together by more than blood, bound by choice and love and commitment. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Ophelia's life. As her belly grew rounder and the baby became more active, Grant became even more protective and attentive. He took over the heavier chores completely, insisting she rest more. He brought her treats from town, books to read, anything he thought might make her smile. And when the harsh Colorado winter set in, he made sure the house was always warm and comfortable, that she never lacked for anything. They grew closer with each passing day, learning each other's habits and preferences, building a life together that felt solid and real. Ophelia had never been happier, and sometimes she had to remind herself that just 6 months ago she had been alone and terrified, with no hope for the future. Grant had given her that hope back, had given her a reason to believe in good things again. The baby came in late February of 1883, during a snowstorm that had Grant pacing nervously, while a midwife from town worked with Ophelia in the bedroom. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Grant, listening to Ophelia's cries from the other room, thought he might go mad with worry. But finally, as dawn was breaking, he heard the sound he had been waiting for. A baby's cry, strong and healthy and loud. The midwife, Mrs. Henderson, came out a few minutes later with a smile on her weathered face. "You have a son, Mr. Gallagher, a big, healthy boy, and your wife did wonderfully. She is tired, but she is just fine." Grant nearly knocked over a chair in his haste to get to the bedroom. Ophelia was propped up against the pillows, looking exhausted but radiant, and in her arms was a tiny bundle. She looked up when Grant entered, and the smile on her face made his heart squeeze. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Grant approached almost reverently, looking down at the tiny red face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had a dusting of dark hair and was making little snuffling noises. He was perfect. "Can I hold him?" Grant asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Of course," Ophelia said, carefully transferring the baby into Grant's arms. The weight of the child in his arms was like nothing Grant had ever felt before. This tiny person, this new life, was depending on him. He had promised to be a father to this baby, and looking down at that small face, he felt the weight and the wonder of that promise settle into his bones. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I am your papa, and I am going to love you and protect you for the rest of my life." Ophelia watched them, tears streaming down her face. What should we name him? They had discussed names but had not settled on anything definite. Grant looked at the baby thoughtfully. "What about William? We could call him Will." "William Gallagher," Ophelia tested the name. I like it. Will Gallagher. Yes, that is perfect. Grant carefully handed the baby back to Ophelia, then sat on the edge of the bed, both of them gazing at their son with wonder. Thank you, he said to Ophelia. Thank you for trusting me, for giving me this chance. Thank you for bringing this beautiful boy into the world. Thank you for being the man you are, Ophelia replied. Thank you for seeing me when I was lost and bringing me home. In the weeks and months that followed, they settled into life as a family. Will was a good baby, healthy and strong, and watching Grant with their son made Ophelia fall even more deeply in love with her husband. He was a natural father, patient and gentle, always ready to help with feedings or to walk the floor when Will was fussy. He talked to the baby constantly, telling him about the ranch, about the animals, about the life they were building together. When spring came and the snow melted, Ophelia's mother showed up at the ranch one afternoon. Ophelia was hanging laundry when she saw the familiar buggy approaching, and her stomach tightened with anxiety. She had not seen or spoken to her mother since the day she was thrown out, nearly a year ago now. Margaret Zimmerman climbed down from the buggy with the help of Ophelia's younger brother David, who drove for her. She looked older than Ophelia remembered, more worn, and there was uncertainty in her eyes as she approached. Ophelia, she said quietly, may I speak with you? Ophelia glanced toward the house where Will was napping inside. What do you want, mother? I wanted to see you, to meet my grandson. I heard you had a boy. You heard correctly. Ophelia kept her voice neutral, not willing to make this easy. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I am sorry, Ophelia. I am so sorry for what happened, for what your father did. I should have fought harder for you. I should have stood up to him. I have regretted it every day since you left. Ophelia felt her own throat tighten. You did not fight for me at all, mother. You let him throw me out like I was garbage. I know, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. Margaret took a step closer. But I am here now, asking if you can forgive me, asking if I can be part of your life again, part of my grandson's life. Ophelia looked at her mother, at the genuine remorse in her face, and felt some of the anger that had been sitting like a stone in her chest begin to loosen. She had been hurt, deeply and terribly, but holding on to that hurt was not going to change the past. And she had learned from Grant that forgiveness was not weakness, it was strength. I do not know if I can forget what happened, Ophelia said slowly, but I am willing to try to forgive, for Will's sake if nothing else. Every child deserves to know their grandmother. Margaret's face crumpled with relief. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Ophelia. Grant came out of the barn just then, having seen the buggy arrive. He walked over to stand beside Ophelia, a silent show of support. Margaret looked at him, and there was something like gratitude in her expression. You must be Grant. I wanted to thank you for taking care of my daughter when her own family failed her. Ophelia takes care of herself, Grant said. I just gave her a place to do it. She is the strongest person I know. Margaret smiled slightly. She gets that from me, though I did not show much of it when it mattered most. She turned back to Ophelia. May I meet my grandson? Ophelia led her mother inside, where Will was just waking up from his nap. She picked him up and held him for a moment, then slowly, carefully, placed him in her mother's arms. Margaret looked down at the baby, and tears streamed down her face. He is beautiful, she whispered. He looks like you did as a baby. He has Grant's eyes, Ophelia said, and there was pride in her voice. Margaret stayed for an hour, holding Will, talking with Ophelia about her life on the ranch, carefully rebuilding the bridge that had been burned. When she left, she asked if she could visit again, and Ophelia agreed. It would take time to fully repair their relationship, but they had made a start. Are you all right? Grant asked after Margaret and David had driven away. Yes, Ophelia said, and realized she meant it. I am more than all right. I have everything I need right here." As Will grew from a baby into a toddler, the ranch prospered. Grant worked hard, and with Ophelia managing the household and helping where she could, they built something solid and lasting. They added more cattle, expanded the house with an additional room, planted a larger garden. Money was sometimes tight, but they always had enough, and more importantly, they had each other. On a warm evening in June of 1885, 2 years after Will was born, Ophelia told Grant she was pregnant again. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with joy, and she laughed too, feeling blessed beyond measure. This pregnancy was easier than the first, probably because she was not dealing with fear and shame, only anticipation and happiness. Their daughter, Grace, was born in February of 1886, a small but fierce little thing with her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn chin. Will, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. Grant was just as besotted with his daughter as he had been with his son, and watching him cradle her tiny form, singing to her in his off-key baritone, made Ophelia's heart overflow with love. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Grant and Ophelia's love deepened with each passing year. They had their challenges, of course. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick animals and equipment that broke at the worst possible times. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. Ophelia's relationship with her mother slowly healed. Margaret visited regularly, and eventually, even Elias came around, though his apologies were stiff and his acceptance grudging. Ophelia's siblings reconnected with her as well, and soon Will and Grace had aunts and uncles and cousins to play with. The Zimmerman family would never be quite what it had been before, but it was something, and that was enough. In the spring of 1889, when Will was 6 and Grace was 3, Ophelia discovered she was pregnant for a third time. This baby came in December, another boy they named Samuel. He was a calm, sweet-natured child, the opposite of his spirited older siblings, and he completed their family in a way Ophelia had not even known was missing. One evening in the summer of 1890, after the children were all asleep, Grant and Ophelia sat on the porch they had built the previous year, watching the stars come out over the mountains. Ophelia leaned against Grant's shoulder, feeling perfectly content. "You remember the night we met?" Grant asked, his arm around her. "How could I forget? You saved my life that night. You saved mine too, you know. I was lonely, even if I did not fully realize it. Building this ranch, making something of myself, it all felt hollow because I did not have anyone to share it with. Then you came along, and suddenly everything had meaning." Ophelia turned to look up at him. "I was so scared that night. I had no idea what I was going to do, how I was going to survive. And then you rode up and offered me kindness when I had given up hope of ever receiving it again." "I am glad I found you," Grant said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I am glad you trusted me enough to stay. I am glad we built this life together." "So am I," Ophelia said. "I would not change a single thing about how we got here. Every moment of pain, every moment of fear, it was all worth it to end up here with you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, the soft rustle of wind through the grass. This was home, Ophelia thought. This was where she belonged. Not the house she had grown up in, not the life she had expected to have, but this ranch with this man and these children. This was where she was meant to be all along. "What are you thinking about?" Grant asked after a while. "About how grateful I am, about how lucky we are, about how much I love you." "I love you too," Grant said, pulling her closer. More than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. You and the children are my whole world." As summer faded into fall and then winter, life continued its steady rhythm. Will started helping his father with ranch chores, learning to ride and rope and care for the animals. Grace proved to have her mother's gift for gardening and cooking, and she loved helping Ophelia in the kitchen. Samuel, still a baby, was content to toddle around after his siblings, watching everything with solemn eyes. The town of Pueblo had changed over the years as well. The railroad had brought more people, more businesses, more growth. The Gallagher Ranch was now considered one of the successful spreads in the area, and Grant's reputation as a fair dealer and hard worker had earned him respect. No one talked anymore about how his marriage had started, or if they did, it was not with judgment but with approval. Ophelia had won over the community with her kindness and her grace, proving that a person's past did not have to define their future. In the spring of 1891, nearly 9 years after that fateful day when Ophelia had been thrown out of her family home, her father became ill. It was pneumonia, and despite the doctor's best efforts, Elias Zimmerman died within a week. Ophelia attended the funeral with Grant by her side, and she felt a complicated mix of emotions as she watched her father being laid to rest. There was grief for the relationship they had never quite repaired, but also a strange sense of peace. She had forgiven him as much as she could, and she hoped he had made his peace with what had happened all those years ago. After the funeral, Margaret pulled Ophelia aside. "Your father asked me to give you something before he died," she said, pressing a small velvet pouch into Ophelia's hand. "He said he wanted you to have this." Ophelia opened the pouch and found her grandmother's pearl necklace inside, the one she had always admired as a child. Her throat tightened. He remembered everything," Margaret said gently. "He was not good at saying he was sorry, but this was his way of trying. He told me to tell you that he was proud of the life you built, proud of the woman you became." Ophelia clutched the necklace to her chest, tears streaming down her face. It was not enough to erase the past, but it was something. It was closure. That night back at the ranch, Grant held her while she cried. She cried for the father she had lost, for the years they had wasted in anger and pride, for the relationship that could have been but never was. And when the tears finally stopped, Grant wiped her face gently and reminded her that she had done everything she could, that she had nothing to feel guilty about. "You gave him a chance to make amends," Grant said. "You showed him grace he did not deserve. That is more than most people would have done. You can be proud of that." Ophelia nodded, leaning into his strength. This was what a true partnership was, she thought. Having someone to lean on when you were weak, someone to catch you when you fell, someone to remind you of your own strength when you forgot it. The years continued to pass, marked by the small joys and challenges of family life. Will grew into a tall, serious young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Grace blossomed into a bright, spirited girl with a gift for making friends wherever she went. Samuel proved to be the peacemaker of the family, always ready with a smile or a kind word to smooth over conflicts. In 1895, when Ophelia was 32 and Grant was 38, they celebrated 13 years of marriage. It was not a grand celebration, just the family gathered around the dinner table, but it was perfect in its simplicity. Ophelia looked around at her children, at her husband, at the life they had built together, and felt a gratitude so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "Why are you crying, Mama?" Grace asked, concerned. "Because I am happy," Ophelia said, smiling through her tears. "Because I have everything I could ever want right here in this room." "We are lucky to have you," Will said, with the earnestness of a 14-year-old trying to sound grown up. "Both of you. You are the best parents anyone could ask for." Grant reached across the table and took Ophelia's hand. "We are the lucky ones," he said. "Every day with you all is a gift." That night, after the children were in bed, Grant and Ophelia walked out to the porch as they often did. The ranch was quiet under the stars, peaceful in a way that went bone deep. They had worked hard for this peace, had fought for it and built it with their own hands. "You ever think about that first night?" Ophelia asked. "About how different things could have been if you had not stopped to help me?" "I think about it sometimes," Grant admitted. "But I like to believe that somehow we would have found each other anyway. Some things are just meant to be." "You believe in fate?" Ophelia asked. "I believe in choice," Grant said. "I chose to stop that night. You chose to trust me. We chose to build a life together. And every day we choose to love each other. That is more powerful than fate." Ophelia thought about that, about all the choices they had made over the years, the big ones and the small ones. Every choice had led them here, to this moment, to this life, and she would not change a single one. "I choose you," she said softly. "I choose this life, this family, this love, today and every day." "And I choose you," Grant replied, pulling her close. "Always and forever." They stood there under the vast Colorado sky, two people who had found each other when they needed it most, who had built something beautiful out of pain and fear and hope. Their love story was not the conventional kind, but it was real and true and lasting. As the years continued to unfold, the Gallagher family grew and prospered. Will eventually took over more of the ranch management, working alongside his father and proving he had inherited Grant's skill and dedication. Grace, beautiful and intelligent, attracted suitors but was in no hurry to settle down, preferring to help her mother and explore her own interests. Samuel, gentle-hearted and thoughtful, showed an early aptitude for book learning and talked about maybe becoming a teacher one day. Grant and Ophelia grew older together, their love deepening with time. The passion of their early years mellowed into something richer, a partnership built on mutual respect and deep affection. They still sat on the porch most evenings, talking about their day, making plans for the future, simply enjoying each other's company. The ranch had become one of the most successful in the region, but more importantly, it had become a real home, filled with love and laughter and memories. In 1898, Margaret Zimmerman passed away peacefully in her sleep. Ophelia grieved, but she was grateful that they had reconciled, that the last years of her mother's life had been spent in harmony with her daughter and grandchildren. At the funeral, Ophelia's siblings gathered around her, and she felt the strength of family, imperfect as it was. "Mother was proud of you," Anna told her afterward. "She talked about you all the time, about how you had overcome such hardship to build such a wonderful life." "She taught me to be strong," Ophelia said. "Even when she could not be strong herself, she gave me the tools I needed to survive." That seemed to comfort Anna and the others, and they left the funeral with promises to stay in closer touch. Ophelia meant to honor those promises. Life was too short to waste on old grudges. As the new century approached, bringing with it changes and challenges they could only begin to imagine, the Gallagher family remained a constant. Will married a sweet girl from town named Sarah, and they moved into a house Grant and Ophelia helped them build on the far corner of the ranch property. Grace surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to go to Denver to study teaching, and though it was hard to let her go, Grant and Ophelia supported her dreams. Samuel, showing his father's work ethic and his mother's kindness, continued to help around the ranch while pursuing his education. And through it all, Grant and Ophelia remained the center, the foundation on which everything else was built. They had started with nothing but hope and determination, and they had created something extraordinary. Not just a successful ranch, though it was that, Not just a family, though they had that too. They had created a love story that would endure, a testament to the power of kindness and second chances, and choosing to believe in each other even when the world said they should not. On a warm evening in the summer of 1900, as the 19th century gave way to the 20th, Grant and Ophelia sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were both in their 50s now, their hair touched with gray, their bodies showing the wear of years of hard work. But their love was as strong as ever, maybe stronger. "We have had a good life," Grant said, holding Ophelia's hand. "We have had a wonderful life," Ophelia corrected. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "Do you ever regret it? Any of it?" "Not for a moment," Ophelia said firmly. "Every hardship, every challenge, it all brought us here. I would walk that road again in a heartbeat if I knew it led to you." Grant raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Ophelia Gallagher, the very best thing." "And you are mine," she replied. "You took a broken, scared girl and showed her what it meant to be truly loved. You gave me a home and a family and a future I thought I had lost forever. You are my hero, Grant Gallagher. I just saw someone who needed help and did what any decent person would do." "No," Ophelia said. "You did what a truly good man would do. You looked beyond the obvious, beyond what society said, and you saw me, the real me, and you loved me anyway." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, as they had done countless times over the past 18 years. The ranch was quiet around them, the cattle settled for the night, the horses nickering softly in the corrals. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear Will and Sarah's children laughing, the next generation of Gallaghers growing up on this land. "What do you think the new century will bring?" Ophelia asked. "Changes, I am sure. Good ones and bad ones, but whatever comes, we will face it together. That is what we have always done." "Together," Ophelia agreed. "Always together." As darkness fell fully, and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, Grant and Ophelia remained on their porch, two souls perfectly matched, two lives perfectly intertwined. Their story had started with pain and fear, with rejection and uncertainty. But it had become something beautiful, something lasting, something true. They had built a legacy that would outlast them, in the land they had worked, in the children they had raised, in the love they had shared. The Gallagher Ranch would stand for generations, a testament to what could be built when two people chose to believe in each other, chose to fight for each other, chose to love each other with everything they had. And years later, when they were both old and gray, when their children had children of their own, when the ranch had expanded beyond anything they had imagined that first night, Grant and Ophelia would still sit on that porch, still hold hands, still feel the wonder of having found each other. Grace would come to visit with her own family, her teaching career having brought her back to Colorado eventually. She would watch her parents together and understand, finally, what real love looked like. It was not the passionate romance of storybooks. It was this: two people choosing each other every single day, supporting each other through every joy and every sorrow, building something that would last long after they were gone. Samuel, who did become a teacher and then a principal, would bring his students to the ranch, sometimes for lessons about history and agriculture. And he would tell them about his parents, about how his mother had been cast out by her family but had found her way to his father, about how his father had seen past society's judgment to the person underneath, about how they had built this ranch and this family through hard work and unwavering love. Will, who would eventually take over the ranch completely, would teach his own children the lessons his father had taught him. That a person's value was not in their circumstances but in their character, that kindness was never wasted, that love was a choice you made every day. and those children would pass those lessons on to their children, and the Gallagher legacy would continue. On a crisp autumn evening in 1920, when Grant was 63 and Ophelia was 57, they celebrated their 38th wedding anniversary. The whole family gathered, 3 generations strong, filling the expanded ranch house with noise and laughter and love. There were grandchildren running around, chasing each other through the rooms where Grant and Ophelia had raised their own children. There was food and music and storytelling, everyone sharing their favorite memories of the family. When the party finally wound down and everyone had gone home or to bed, Grant and Ophelia found themselves alone on the porch once more. It was their place, had been since the beginning, and they returned to it like homing birds. 38 years, Grant mused. Where did the time go? It went into this, Ophelia said, gesturing at the house, at the ranch spread out around them, at the legacy they had built. Into every moment of joy and every moment of struggle, into raising our children and loving each other. That is where it went, and I would not have spent it any other way. Grant pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder as she had done countless times before. They were older now, their bodies not as strong as they once were, but their love was undiminished. If anything, it had grown stronger with time, deepened by shared experience and mutual commitment. "I love you," Grant said simply. "I have loved you since the night I found you walking alone on that road, and I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Ophelia replied. "You are my heart, Grant Gallagher. You always have been and you always will be." They remained there, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars wheel overhead. The future stretched before them, unknown and unknowable, but they were not afraid. They had each other, and they had built something that would endure long after they were gone. Their story had begun with banishment and shame, with fear and uncertainty. But it had become a love story for the ages, a testament to the transforming power of kindness and the enduring strength of commitment. Grant had taken in a pregnant woman cast out by her family, and in doing so, he had found his soulmate. Ophelia had trusted a stranger when she had every reason not to, and in doing so, she had found her home. Together, they had built a life that mattered, a love that lasted, a legacy that would endure. And that, in the end, was all that really mattered. Not the hardships they had faced or the obstacles they had overcome, but the love they had shared and the life they had built together. As the years continued to pass, as their children grew into adults with families of their own, as the ranch continued to prosper and grow, Grant and Ophelia remained the heart of it all. Their love story inspired everyone who knew them, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most painful beginnings. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the world was peaceful, they would sit on their porch and hold hands and remember that first night when a cowboy stopped to help a desperate woman, and 2 lives changed forever. They would remember, and they would be grateful, and they would love each other with the same depth and passion they had felt from the beginning. That was their story. Not a perfect story, because life is never perfect. But a true story, a real story, a story of love conquering all obstacles and enduring through all challenges. It was the story of how Ophelia Zimmerman became Ophelia Gallagher, of how Grant Gallagher found his purpose and his partner, of how 2 broken people made each other whole. And it was a story with a happy ending, which is all anyone can really ask for. They lived their lives surrounded by love, supported by family, content in the knowledge that they had chosen well and chosen truly. When their time finally came, many years later they passed peacefully, knowing they had lived fully and loved completely. The Gallagher Ranch continued long after they were gone, passed down through generations, each one adding their own chapter to the family story. But it all started with that one moment of kindness, one choice to stop and help, one decision to trust despite every reason not to. That baby that Grant had said needed a father grew up to be William Gallagher, a man of integrity and compassion who raised his own family on the same principles his parents had taught him. And he never forgot what his mother told him about those early days, about how his father had saved them both with his kindness and his love. The story became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It became a reminder that circumstances do not define destiny, that shame can be transformed into honor, that love is the most powerful force in the universe. It became the foundation on which the entire Gallagher legacy was built. And somewhere, in the peaceful evening air of Colorado, if you listen carefully, you might still hear the echo of two voices talking quietly on a porch, planning their future, celebrating their present, grateful for the past that brought them together. You might hear the sound of love that endured through everything, love that transformed two lives and created something beautiful and lasting. That is the power of choosing kindness. That is the miracle of second chances. That is the magic of love that sees beyond circumstances to the person underneath. And that is the story of how a cowboy took in a pregnant woman banished by her family, said that baby needs a father, and changed both their lives forever. It was a story that began in pain but ended in joy. A story that started with loss but ended with abundance. A story that proved, beyond any doubt, that love can heal all wounds and overcome all obstacles. And most importantly, it was a story with a happy ending, with two people who loved each other deeply, raised a beautiful family, built a lasting legacy, and lived their lives knowing they had found exactly what they were meant to find: each other. Years after they had both passed, when their great-grandchildren would ask about the beginning of the Gallagher family, they would be told about that dusty road in Pueblo, about a young woman with nowhere to go, and a young man who chose kindness. They would be told about how love grows strongest in the hardest soil, how commitment deepens through shared struggle, how the best stories begin with choosing hope over despair. And those great-grandchildren would carry that story forward, adding their own chapters, but always remembering the foundation on which it all rested. The moment when Grant Gallagher saw Ophelia Zimmerman walking alone and made the choice that would define both their lives. The moment he offered help without judgment, safety without conditions, and eventually, love without limits. That was the true beginning of everything that came after, the seed from which the entire Gallagher legacy grew. And it all started with one simple truth that Grant understood instinctively and never forgot. That baby needs a father, and that woman needs someone to believe in her. And sometimes the greatest thing a person can do is simply be there when someone else needs them most. The end.